Hello, and welcome to this discussion on the EU Taxonomy regulation. In this discussion, we will focus on the impact on the non-financial companies. With me to discuss this topic, I have Emilia Jurander Delleborn, who is a sustainable finance expert here at Swedbank. Welcome, Emilia.
Thank you, Matthias.
And also welcome to you, Elin Larsson, who is from our Sustainable Capital Markets team.
Thank you.
Let me start by asking you, Emilia. A lot of our customers are non-financial companies. Are they at all impacted by the taxonomy, or is this regulation more for the financial markets?
Well, they are impacted. For example, when looking at taxonomy, when it defines when an economic activity is environmentally sustainable, this is mainly done in relation to activities that are performed by non-financial companies. So from that aspect, it is relevant. But then also taxonomy puts reporting requirements on some large companies, including non-financial companies. And also from that aspect, taxonomy is relevant.
Okay, so some companies need to disclose information on the taxonomy in their sustainability report. Elin, which companies are we talking about here?
The short answer would be that if a company is required to have a sustainability report, it is also required to include information on the taxonomy in that report. This is, however, partly true. So first, which companies that need to have a sustainability report is described on an EU level in the Non-Financial Reporting Directive, also called NFRD. So for the taxonomy, the criteria of which companies that need to report on the taxonomy, it's the same as those in the NFRD. However, as the NFRD is a directive, many countries have taken the opportunity to widen the scope of which companies that need to report and need to have a sustainability report. But for the taxonomy, these national specific criteria are not relevant.
Okay, but what you're saying then is that it could be that a company that needs to report or publish a sustainability report according to national law doesn't necessarily need to report under the taxonomy.
Yes, that's exactly right. And we have those cases, so it's good to be aware of this fact.
Okay, interesting. But then it makes you wonder what companies need to include the taxonomy in their sustainability report. Maybe you can enlighten us there, Emilia.
Yes, I'll try to do so. So there are some different criteria that a company needs to fulfill to be such a company. And the first thing is that the company should be incorporated into an EU member state. So it should be an EU company. And then the second one is that the legal form of the company should be in scope of the NFRD. And that, of course, differs country to country which legal forms those are. But for Sweden, that is mainly aktiebolag, so limited liability companies. And then the third criteria is that the company should be of public interest. Often this is mentioned as companies with publicly traded stocks. This is, however, a simplification. If we're looking at the definition, it is when a company has transferable securities admitted for trading on a regulated market. And we know transferable securities includes also bonds, for example, so it's not only equities. And then there are 5 criteria. We are now on the fourth. So the fourth one is that the company has more than 500 employees. And the last one is that the company either has more than 40 million euros in net turnover or more than 20 million euros on their balance sheet, or both.
Okay, so a lot of criteria. But surely there cannot be that many companies in the market that needs to report on the taxonomy.
You're very right there, Matthias. Currently, the scope of the companies is limited. However, on an EU level, there's currently a proposal to amend NFRD with the regulation called the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, abbreviated as CSRD, so another abbreviation there. And the CSRD is proposed to extend the scope, so we can expect that within a few years, more companies will need to include information on taxonomy in their sustainability report.
But let's say then that I have a company that needs to report according to the taxonomy. What is it that I need to report on then, Elin?
Well, you need to disclose to what extent your business is taxonomy eligible, but more importantly, taxonomy aligned. So for non-financial companies, this is done for each activity based on 3 different KPIs. namely turnover, capital expenditures, and operating expenditures. And the purpose of using these different KPIs is to tell how much taxonomy aligned you are today and how much you're spending to become taxonomy aligned.
Sounds reasonable. But let's try and make it a bit more tangible. Perhaps you could provide us with an example, Mina.
Yes, I'll do so. So for example, let's say that we have a company and it's called Fine Real Estate Limited. So they're focusing on renting out apartments. So if we look at the KPIs that Elin went through, let's start with the turnover, then 100% of their turnover comes from renting out these houses. So that is taxonomy eligible activity, so 100% taxonomy eligible. But then 50% of these turnover derives from buildings that are taxonomy aligned. So for KPI turnover, they would then report 100% taxonomy eligibility and 50% taxonomy alignment.
But that's the turnover. What about capital expenditures?
So for capital expenditures, let's say that this company has done a few investments.
Yep.
So some within the same sector that they're in. So they have bought for 50% of their capital expenditure, which is also called CAPEX. They have bought new houses. So 50% taxonomy eligible. And half of the cost related to that relates to buildings that are taxonomy aligned. So 25% taxonomy aligned. And then they have also invested into solar panels that they have put on the roofs of their buildings. And they have invested 20% for that. And all of that is taxonomy aligned. So 20, 20, eligible and alignment. And then lastly, they have also decided to update their transport fleet. So they have decided to buy new diesel cars. And they have done so for the rest, so the 30% of the CAPEX. So 30% is also their taxonomy eligible, as cars are included. However, diesel cars are not taxonomy aligned. So looking at CAPEX, you would have 100% taxonomy eligibility that you will report, and then you would report 25 plus 20, so 45% taxonomy alignment.
Okay. And then also operational expenditures. What could that look like?
Well, in this case, they have 50% is linked to energy usage. Of course, they have buildings and the cost is high for energy. And half of that comes from oil-based energy, and then half of it comes from renewable energy. So we can see here that oil energy is not taxonomy eligible even, it's not covered by taxonomy, but the renewable are covered. And in this case, let's say that they are also taxonomy aligned. So here would be 25% taxonomy eligible and 25% taxonomy aligned. And then the rest is, maintenance of the building, so they can keep their buildings in good shape. And that is 50% taxonomy eligible and let's say 25% taxonomy aligned. So for operational expenditures, they would report then 75% taxonomy eligible and then 50% taxonomy aligned.
Okay, thank you for that example. Made it a bit more clear to understand. And there are a lot of factors to consider, obviously. But when are the companies to report on this? Or are they already reporting on it?
Well, if you need to report on the taxonomy, you should already have published your first report, being the one for 2021. However, as this is the first report, the requirements are somewhat lower compared to upcoming reports. So for this 2021 report, companies have solely reported on the extent to what their business activities are taxonomy eligible. And therefore, this first report doesn't tell how much taxonomy aligned a company is, but rather if a company is taxonomy aligned, but rather if they can assess its business under the taxonomy or not.
Okay, so when then will we know how aligned a company is with the taxonomy? When will the company start to report on that?
Well, already from the next report, being the one for 2022, so companies will then report to what extent their business is taxonomy aligned in relation to the first two environmental objectives, being climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation. And the reason why companies only will report on these two objectives and not all 6 straight away is because as of today, we only have technical screening criteria for these two objectives. But if we then look ahead, companies will report on the other 4 as well, and that is 12 months after those technical screening criteria are in place. And this will most likely be in the 2023 report, but it could also be later, depending on how much time the EU will need to finalize those technical screening criteria.
Okay. But what then if my company does not need to produce a sustainability report? Does the taxonomy impact my company in any way?
Yes, I would say it still impacts your company. So even though you don't have a regulatory requirement, you can still expect that stakeholders will be wanting to know how taxonomy aligned is your business. And to stakeholders that could be banks or, for example, your buyers. So from that perspective, yes. But then also if you're issuing green bonds, for example, there you can definitely expect that investors will ask, so how taxonomy aligned is your green bond? But I also want to highlight that there's not just requirements coming from taxonomy, there's also business opportunities in taxonomy. So for example, we can assume that the demand for taxonomy-aligned products and investments will be high on the market, especially as the supply is limited. And then also a lot of companies are working on becoming more sustainable. And here you can use the taxonomy as a guiding tool for you to see what can I do to become more sustainable. Okay.
So what would you recommend my company to do?
But I would start first by looking at all of your business activities. So not just, on your main sector, but also where you're spending your money. Is there any part that is taxonomy eligible? And if there is, then I would assess, are they also taxonomy aligned? And if they are not, what does this company need to do? What do you need to do to become taxonomy aligned? And also if you come to conclusion that none of your business activities is taxonomy eligible, you shouldn't just stop there and never think about taxonomy again, because taxonomy is developing all the time. So it could be included in a year or months, etc. So I would recommend to continue to listen to videos or other news from your banks, for example, like this one, or from financial advisors.
To stay updated then.
Stay updated, yeah. Definitely.
Thank you for that advice. And thank you both for participating in this discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you who have watched this discussion, and we hope it has given you more information about how the taxonomy will impact non-financial companies. If you're interested in knowing more about the taxonomy, you can find more information on our external website. Thank you for watching.